It's April 10, 2026, and we're watching a high-stakes showdown with Iran's proxies versus Israel, and Iran kind of doing a soft closure of the Straits of Hormuz in retaliation to Israel strikes in Lebanon. That's the biggest breaking development right now. Israel's unleashing what they're calling Operation Eternal Darkness starting yesterday, where they slammed over 100 Hezbollah targets in a lightning 10-minute wave that ranks as one of the hardest hits since the pager strikes back in 2024. Israeli pilots likely led with the F-35I, a Deer stealth fighter. That's the advanced avionics F-35, where Israel has taken the US F-35 and they've changed the avionics to suit their exact missions. It slipped out low observable operations to take out command centers, missile sites, and Radwan forces positioned around southern Beirut suburbs, the Bekaa Valley, and southern Lebanon, while keeping the mission precise and focused on the terrorist network of Hezbollah. And then this just came in breaking. Iranian military sources claim UAE Mirage 2009 jets were involved in an attack on the Liavan Island refinery. That was yesterday. Reports say the US informed Iran that the strikes were not linked to the US or Israel. So, this happened after the ceasefire, or maybe just before, and it looks like UAE is taking the gloves off and striking some of these important critical oil islands of Iran. And then, if that wasn't enough, I'm bringing in Preston Stewart. Preston Stewart has a massive YouTube channel, over 1 million subscribers, and I wanted to bring him in and ask him about some of the lessons learned from the US-Iran war and what could happen if this kicks back up and there's actually a ground invasion. So definitely stay around to hear Preston's thoughts. And then this was released by the White House. 13,000 plus Iranian targets struck, 155 Iranian ships destroyed. 90% of Iran's weapons factories by and then 80% of Iran's nuclear industrial base struck. And then President Trump posted this. He said all U.S. ships, aircraft, and military personnel with additional ammunition, weaponry, and anything else that is appropriate and necessary for the lethal prosecution and destruction of an already substantially degraded enemy will remain in place and around Iran until such a time that the Rayal agreement reached is fully complied with. If for any reason it is not, which is highly unlikely, then the shooting starts bigger and better and stronger than anyone has ever seen before. It was agreed to a long time ago, and despite all the fake rhetoric to the contrary, no nuclear weapons and the Straits of Hormuz will be open and safe. In the meantime, our great military is loading up and resting, looking forward actually to its next conquest. America is back. Well, what could be next? If it's not Iran, could it be Cuba? I'll be covering all this stuff this week. And then President Trump mentioned this. He said, the failing New York Times and fake news CNN each reported a totally fake 10-point plan on the Iran negotiations, which was meant to discredit the people involved in the peace process. All 10 points were a made-up hoax. Evil losers make America great again. Wow. CNN going against President Trump. Weird. We've never seen this before. I mean, at this point, the IRGC is like, hey, CNN, thanks for being our propaganda arm as well. We need some help. So, let's pop the press into it real quick. And as of note, we recorded this on April 7th, just before the ceasefire was about to take place. We didn't know it was going to take place at the time of recording the video, but I want you to listen to what he says about the potential ground invasion and some of the lessons learned from this conflict that are likely going to apply to every other conflict going forward. Hey everybody, welcome to this episode. I'm here with Preston Stewart. You probably know who he is already, but he's got an amazing YouTube channel, over 1 million subscribers. I'm going to link to that in the description. Preston, how's it going, man? Great, Ryan. Appreciate the invite, man. Yeah, absolutely. Can you just tell everybody just a quick overview for a minute of your background and kind of what got you into YouTube? Yeah, so, military background, West Point 2009, graduated there, international relations and terrorism. Into the army as a field artillery officer to the 101st, couple trips to Afghanistan, then left active in 14, some time in the reserves and guard up until last year, about 1 year, completely out. Wow. And then about 5 years ago started making content online just as a kind of a hobby. When the war in Ukraine kicked off, there was just a lot more interest of what is a surface-to-air weapon system, what is artillery versus a tank that people just didn't care about a month prior to that. So tried to help there essentially and break down some of what we were seeing. Speaking of that, so right now 8 p.m. Eastern Time deadline for Iran to open up the Straits of Hormuz, right? At the time of this video being produced, this will release maybe a few days after that, but what's your thoughts on that? On the deadline that President Trump has set, and where do we go from here with that specific Straits of Hormuz news? That's a small question, right? No. What we got like the biggest deadline in this war, and we're recording before and it's going after. This could go in so many different directions. Wall Street Journal had a little graphic they put out today where it's not clear, but like we've definitely had 3 or 4 different deadlines in the last couple weeks. So, we've got to keep that in mind. And he has said that without any concrete backing. So, the first time that moved, he said negotiations are going well. And from the Iranians, they said, what are you even talking about? Like we're not talking. Now, how much of that is, that could be true. They could actually be talking and there were breakthroughs. But from the publicly available information, it seems like the president just made the determination to push the deadline a little bit. So, that's a possibility. If that doesn't happen, it looks like the target set is going to widen is probably the simplest way to put it. We don't have the resources to conduct any sort of large-scale invasion at this point. We could do little things around some of the outskirts of the Persian Gulf, but man, that seems risky based off what we have there right now. So, really, you're talking about we've been the bombs have been insane. The swords have been insane. I don't know that we have I defer to you, but I don't know that we have the platforms to double the volume. It would be more just an expansion from my perspective, an expansion of what we're going after, and he suggested that would be, energy infrastructure largely. Kind of speaking of where this goes from here. So, can you just game out from your background, your perspective? We know Iran's 2.5 times the size of Texas, but a lot of people have been saying, will there be a ground invasion? What would it, let's just say there was. What would that look like? And then, we can debunk it after, 'cause I'm not for it either. I am definitely not for a ground invasion, having flown in Afghanistan, seeing how badly that went, but can you just game out what it would actually look like in your mind, man? I think for starters, it's worth saying that we are nowhere near that right now because we don't have the resources in theater. There's around 50,000-ish American service members in the broader Middle East, but that includes pilots and maintainers and staff. That's not like 50,000 infantrymen chomping at the bit to cross the berm. So even if it was 50,000, that is significantly lower or ready to invade. That's significantly lower than when we pushed into Iraq in 03. So, first in terms of timing, we would need quite a while here to build up forces. And that's not the kind of thing you can hide. Yeah, we can hide special operators moving overseas. We can hide, pilots are really good at OBSAC and Air Force in general, but when you're talking about a battalion, let alone a brigade or division of U.S. Army soldiers, like cats out of the bag because the girlfriends talk and like it you just can't keep that a secret anymore. Everybody talks, the whole town notices. So, it would require pretty significant buildup. Historically, I think an idea would have been to go through Iraq because the alternative is trying to come in. We're not going in through the north. That doesn't seem feasible. Afghanistan is not a viable option at this point. The Persian Gulf would be a bit of a challenge. Take out an amphibious assault, all the challenges with that, but we'd have to move them through this very narrow strait before conducting the assault. So, that would be incredibly risky. So overland through Iraq, maybe launching from one of the Gulf states across the Persian Gulf. So is there anything right now from a technology perspective that you're excited about? Yeah, man. I'll go on this rant any opportunity one get, and it's a boring one. We need more nets. Nets over our airfields. Specifically nets over our facilities. We have seen how much damage little drones can do. So the long-range Shaw heads, I mean those are like cars coming out of the sky, right? And that's not going to stop those. But these smaller FPV or even bomber drones that you or I could put together in our basement and take out and fly across the street. We have a lot of locations around the world where we stage very expensive aircraft, sometimes out in the open. And the solution, a very short-term simple solution, is just put up some nets. And I know it makes things a little more complicated. But it's probably better to do that than deal with like B1s in the UK right now going up in flames. Like, what are we doing? So, we have seen that happen in Russia with some of their aircraft before. I feel like it's a relatively inexpensive short-term solution, and we got to get on that. It'll save. It's more of an equipment saver than a lifesaver at this point, but again, we're talking about nets, man. It's not fancy technology. So, that's the one I'll hammer on till the cows come home. Yeah. I mean, sometimes you got to go low-tech when the enemy goes low-tech like these are low-tech drones, like DJI drones, like go low-tech as well. So, President Trump announced that ceasefire just a few days ago looks to be holding, but it's becoming very shaky with what's going on between Israel and Hezbollah. Hezbollah is Iran's top proxy army, and Israel made it clear that the fight with them and Hezbollah stays completely separate from the ceasefire. J.D. Vance actually was out talking about how Iran had a misunderstanding, thinking that all of their proxies were off limits as well, but it looks like Israel's basically taking the gloves off against the proxies. And as the old saying goes, you don't bring a knife to a gunfight when it's American-backed tech that Israel is using in the air against Hezbollah. This is American air power in action operated by Israel. And what happens next could change how we see the fight over Iran and the Straits of Hormuz. So on April 8, Israel launched Operation Eternal Darkness, a highly effective large-scale airstrike campaign that's delivered one of the most significant blows to Hezbollah since the 2024 pager operation. In a tight 10-minute window, they hit more than 100 targets, including command centers, intelligence sites, missile infrastructure, radar force positions, and other terror assets spread across southern Beirut suburbs, the Beau Valley, and southern Lebanon. This was necessary, Israel says, to keep degrading Hezbollah, Iran's most capable proxy in the so-called axis of resistance. And as we've seen as a part of the framework, a lot of what needs to be done is for Iran to sever the connection with these proxies. Yeah. Kind of seems like a snowball's chance in hell. And I think Israel kind of understands that at some point Iran is never going to cut those connections, because Iran sees the Straits of Hormuz and their connections to their proxy armies as the thing that's keeping the regime in power. The group has fired thousands of rockets into Israel and posed a direct threat to civilians for months. Israel focused on deeply embedded terror infrastructure to build a safer buffer zone along its northern border and knock out long-range capabilities that have endangered its people. Reports show 182 to about 250 people killed, hundreds wounded. And Hezbollah hides amongst the civilian population. They use human shields. Again, the same terrorist tactic that Iran was using when they asked all their children to go to the different power plants and bridges that might have been struck if the actual ceasefire didn't take place. Hezbollah does the exact same thing. That's the tactic that they use. And it shows their complete disregard for Lebanese lives while Israel stuck to their military objectives. And I know that's controversial, but the terrorists around the globe, the terrorist mindset that the IRGC has is the same as Hezbollah, and that is use your people to protect your regime. They basically see their people as property to keep themselves in power, and they'll gladly harvest thousands of their own people if it keeps the regime in power. That's how dark that gets. But let's talk about the platform that Israel is using to make this happen. And the F-35I Adir stealth workhorse modified Lightning II jet with Israeli avionics, electronic warfare upgrades, and the ability to carry precision munitions internally to stay low observable. It cruises at Mach 1.6, that's about 1,200 miles per hour for anybody keeping track. With a combat radius of around 700 miles on internal fuel alone, letting it penetrate contested airspace, gather battlefield data through sensor fusion, and deliver standoff strikes with complete accuracy that minimizes collateral damage. And then the F-15I Ram based on the Strike Eagle brings raw power with twin engines pushing Mach 2 and conformal fuel tanks for long range. It hauls up to 18,000 pounds of precision-guided munitions like JDAMs for heavy hitting on hardened targets or missile infrastructure. And then don't sleep on the F-16I Sufa. That is a highly modified two-seat fighting Falcon. It adds conformal fuel tanks for extended reach, advanced Israeli electronic warfare suites, and multi-role flexibility for escorts, additional strikes, close air support. These platforms reflect the strong US-Israeli partnership and the technological edge that American equipment provides. Let's move to the 4D Chess Strategic Analysis section, the section that you've all been waiting for. Specifically, the US's approach under this framework for the ceasefire. It's positioned America and its partners from a position of strength, showing the military isn't going anywhere. They're sitting right there. And if the framework doesn't actually come to fruition, as they like to say, then the US military is locked and loaded and ready to go again. Allowing Israel to handle Hezbollah separately allows the proxy arms of the Iranian regime to be cut off. The Strait of Hormuz though, that's the checkpoint that Iran is harassing, but they can't fully control it without some consequences. There's still some leverage on them. Just like we saw one of their oil islands getting hit by potentially one of the Gulf neighbors shows that Iran is not fully in the driver's seat even though they have restricted the flow through the Straits of Hormuz. But does the US put boots on the ground to open that strait and risk the lives of hundreds of Marines? Is the juice really worth the squeeze? I think that's probably the big conversation at the Pentagon right now. So, what do you guys think happens from here? Do you think this escalates? Do you think the US goes in again here in just a couple weeks? Let me know in the comments below. And then a special thanks again to Preston Stewart for giving us that background information on the lessons learned and where things could go from here. And who knows if a ground invasion happens, what that would look like. So definitely check out that full episode. The link is in the description. And then the link to Preston Stewart's channel is in the description as well. Definitely check out his channel and then click the link in the description. Become a member of the Max Ready Room. I do priority replies to the members during the live streams, which we're doing pretty much every day at this point. So, click link in the description, become a member, and then watch this next video that pops up right here. This is Ryan, also known as Max Afterburner, signing.